I was taken by the Phoenix Sisters, and their leader declared my body her rebirth flame. I never believed in fate until the night the sky cracked open and wings of fire descended upon me. My name is Marcus, and I was nothing more than a field researcher, studying migratory patterns in the Sonoran Desert when everything I knew about reality burned away. The heat hit me first, not the oppressive summer heat I'd grown accustomed to, but something alive, something that breathed and pulsed with intention. I looked up from my instruments and saw them, silhouettes against the setting sun, their wings spread wide like living flames, each feather a tongue of fire that didn't consume but illuminated. There were 3 of them circling above me, their movements graceful and predatory, and when they descended, the sand beneath my feet turned to glass. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey, as if my body understood something my mind refused to accept. I was chosen, though for what, I couldn't yet comprehend. The tallest one landed first, her feet barely touching the ground, and when she looked at me, her eyes were molten gold, burning with an intelligence that made me feel exposed, vulnerable, seen in ways I'd never been seen before. She didn't speak, not with words, but I heard her voice inside my skull, resonant and commanding. "You are the one," she said, and before I could protest, before I could even think to resist, her sisters flanked me, their hands gripping my arms with impossible strength, and the world dissolved into flames. When my vision cleared, I was no longer in the desert I knew. The sky above me was not blue, but a deep crimson, streaked with veins of orange and gold, as if the heavens themselves were perpetually caught in an eternal sunset. The air tasted different, thick with ash, and something sweeter, like burning amber and cinnamon. I lay on smooth obsidian ground, its surface warm beneath my palms, and as I pushed myself up, I realized I was in the center of a vast, circular plaza. Around me rose structures that defied logic, towers carved from blackened stone that spiraled upward like frozen flames, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with inner light. This was not Earth. I knew that immediately, and the realization sent ice through my veins despite the overwhelming heat. I saw them then, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, women with wings of fire perched on the structures, watching me with eyes that glowed in the dimming light. They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, their bodies both human and something entirely other, their skin marked with patterns that resembled embers cooling on skin, their hair moving as if caught in an invisible wind, strands of red and gold and deepest black. None of them spoke, but I felt their attention pressing down on me like a physical weight, suffocating and inescapable. The 3 who had taken me descended from one of the towers, landing in perfect synchronization around me. Up close, I could see the details I'd missed in my initial terror. Their wings weren't separate appendages, but seemed to grow directly from their shoulder blades, each feather a mixture of flesh and fire, solid and ephemeral simultaneously. They wore armor of sorts, but it looked grown rather than forged, dark metal that seemed to breathe with them, covering their bodies in strategic places while leaving others exposed, a deliberate display of power and beauty intertwined. The tallest one, the one who had spoken to me before, stepped forward, and I finally found my voice. "Where am I?" I demanded, though my voice cracked with fear. "What do you want from me?" She tilted her head, studying me the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen, and when she smiled, I saw that her teeth were slightly too sharp, predatory. "You are in Pyrothea," she said aloud this time, her voice like crackling flames. "The realm of the Phoenix Sisterhood. And what we want from you, Marcus, is far more complicated than you can imagine." The fact that she knew my name when I'd never spoken, it sent fresh terror through me. "I want to go home," I said, hating how weak I sounded. She laughed, and her sisters joined her, a sound like wind through fire. "Home," she repeated, as if testing the word. "That concept no longer applies to you. You were chosen, marked since birth, though you never knew it. Your bloodline carries something we need, something essential to our survival, to our transformation, to our power." One of her sisters, slightly shorter with wings that burned brighter blue at the tips, circled around me, her fingers trailing across my shoulders, and I felt heat seeping into my skin wherever she touched. "He doesn't look like much," she said, her voice melodic and mocking. "Are you certain the prophecy speaks of him?" The leader's eyes never left mine. "The mark doesn't lie, Seraphine. Look at his chest." Before I could protest, Seraphine's hand pressed against my shirt, and I felt intense heat, not burning but revealing. I looked down and gasped. There, over my heart, glowing beneath my skin, was a symbol I'd never seen before. Intricate spirals and flames intertwined into something that resembled a bird with its wings spread. It pulsed with golden light, in rhythm with my heartbeat, and as I stared at it in horror, I realized it wasn't new. I'd had strange dreams since childhood, dreams of burning, of flying, of being consumed and reborn, dreams I'd dismissed as nightmares or stress-induced hallucinations. "What is that?" I breathed. "What have you done to me?" The leader stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body, could smell smoke and flowers and something indescribably feminine and dangerous. "We have done nothing yet," she said softly. "That mark has always been there, dormant, waiting. You are descended from an ancient line, Marcus, one of the few humans whose ancestors mingled with our kind millennia ago, when the veils between worlds were thinner. Your blood carries the essence we need for the rebirth ritual." The third sister, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice deeper, more resonant. "We should take him to the nest," she said. "The matriarch will want to examine him herself before we proceed." The leader nodded, and before I could ask what they meant by the nest, or who this matriarch was, they were lifting me again, their hands gripping my arms with that same impossible strength. We rose into the crimson sky, their wings beating in unison, and I dangled between them like captured prey, the ground falling away at dizzying speed. I tried to struggle, but one squeeze from Seraphine's hand sent pain lancing through my arm, a warning without words. As we flew, I caught glimpses of the world below, this Pyrothea they'd named. It was a realm of contradictions, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. I saw forests where the trees grew with leaves of flame, entire ecosystems that seemed to thrive on heat rather than water. I saw rivers of what looked like molten gold winding through valleys of blackened stone. I saw other creatures too, things that were neither human nor phoenix, beings that watched our passage with glowing eyes from perches and caves. This was a world fully realized, ancient and complex, and I was being carried toward its heart, whether I wanted to go or not. The nest, as they called it, was built into the side of a massive mountain that rose from the center of Pyrothea, like a jagged tooth. The entrance was a natural cave mouth, but as we flew closer, I saw it was carved with elaborate designs, the same spiraling patterns that marked my chest, and guarded by more of these phoenix women, their wings spread in challenge until they recognized my captors. We descended into the mountain, through passages lit by veins of fire running through the stone itself, and the deeper we went, the hotter it became, though somehow I found myself able to breathe, to endure temperatures that should have killed me instantly. The mark on my chest grew warmer in response, as if recognizing its surroundings, and I wondered with growing dread what exactly this rebirth ritual entailed. Finally, we emerged into a vast chamber, and I forgot to breathe. It was enormous, larger than any cathedral I'd ever seen, its ceiling lost in shadows and smoke. The walls were lined with alcoves where more phoenix women perched, hundreds of them now, all watching our arrival with intense interest. But it was the center of the chamber that captured my attention, a massive circular pool filled not with water, but with flames that burned in every color imaginable, from deep violet to brilliant white, constantly shifting and swirling. And rising from the center of that pool, seated on a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, was her. She was larger than the others, more imposing, her wings easily twice the size of any I'd seen, and they burned with an intensity that made the air shimmer around her. Her skin was marked with more intricate patterns, covering nearly every visible inch, and they glowed from within, pulsing with power that made the very stone beneath my feet vibrate. Her hair was longest, cascading down past her waist in waves of liquid fire, and her eyes, when they fixed on me, were not gold like the others, but a deep, burning red, ancient and knowing and utterly merciless. She wore no armor, no clothing at all save for jewelry made of what looked like crystallized flame, and her nakedness was not vulnerability but absolute dominance, a statement of power that needed no covering. This was the matriarch, I knew without being told, the leader of the Phoenix Sisterhood, and I was standing before her as an offering, a sacrifice, though to what end I still didn't understand. My captors released me, and I stumbled forward, my legs barely supporting me. The matriarch rose from her throne, and even from this distance, I could feel the heat of her, waves of it washing over me, making sweat pour down my face and back. "So," her voice boomed through the chamber, rich and commanding, "this is the vessel the prophecy promised us." She descended from her throne, her wings folding behind her, and walked across the surface of the flaming pool as if it were solid ground. With each step, the flames parted for her, bowing to her presence, and I realized she wasn't walking on them, but commanding them, bending reality itself to her will. She emerged from the pool and approached me, and I found I couldn't move, couldn't run, could barely even breathe as she circled me slowly, studying me from every angle. Her hand reached out, one finger trailing down my chest where the mark glowed, and the touch sent electricity through my entire body, pleasure and pain indistinguishable from each other. "Yes," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "The bloodline is strong in this one. The essence is pure." She looked up at me then, her red eyes boring into mine. "Do you know what you are, Marcus?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. She smiled, revealing those same two sharp teeth. "You are a key," she said simply, "a living catalyst for our most sacred ritual. Every 1,000 years, the Phoenix Sisterhood must undergo rebirth, shedding our old forms and emerging renewed, stronger, more powerful. But this rebirth requires fuel, a very specific kind of fuel. We need the life essence of one who carries both human and Phoenix blood, diluted over generations but still present, still potent. Your ancestors mated with our kind long ago, and you are the culmination of that union, the perfect balance between mortal and immortal." Horror washed over me as understanding dawned. "You're going to kill me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The matriarch laughed, a sound like roaring flames. "Kill you? No, Marcus. Killing you would be wasteful. We need you alive, conscious, willing." That last word made my blood run cold. "Willing?" I repeated. "What if I refuse?" Her expression hardened, the amusement fading from her eyes. "Then we will make you willing," she said flatly. "We have methods, ancient techniques of persuasion that even the strongest minds cannot resist, but it would be better for you if you chose to cooperate. The ritual can be pleasurable, transcendent even, if you surrender to it. Resistance only brings pain." She turned away from me, addressing the assembled sisterhood. "Sisters!" she called out, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Behold our salvation, our path to renewal. This one will serve as the flame for our rebirth, and through his sacrifice we shall ascend to new heights of power." The chamber erupted in sound, hundreds of voices crying out in what might have been joy or hunger or both, and the noise was deafening, overwhelming. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, but the sound seemed to come from inside my skull as much as from without. The matriarch raised her hand, and silence fell instantly, absolute and terrifying in its swiftness. "Take him to the preparation chamber," she commanded. "He must be cleansed, educated, made ready for what is to come. The ritual will take place in 7 cycles, when the crimson moon reaches its apex and the veil between life and death grows thin. Until then, he is to be treated with the respect due to one who will give us everything." 2 new Phoenix women descended from the alcoves, different from the 3 who had captured me, these ones wearing robes of deep red trimmed with gold. They helped me to my feet with surprising gentleness, and I was too overwhelmed, too terrified to resist as they led me from the chamber. Behind me, I heard the matriarch's voice one last time, soft, but carrying clearly to my ears alone. "Do not despair, Marcus. What you will experience is beyond anything your mortal mind can comprehend. You may even thank us, in the end." That thought terrified me more than anything else she'd said, the idea that I might be transformed so completely that I would accept, even embrace, what they planned to do to me. As we moved through corridors deeper into the mountain, I tried to think of escape, but every path seemed guarded, every exit watched, and even if I could somehow get past the Phoenix women, where would I go? This wasn't my world. I had no idea how to return home, and something told me that even if I could, I would never be the same. The mark on my chest had changed me already, awakened something within me that recognized this place, that responded to the heat and the flames with a hunger I didn't want to acknowledge. The preparation chamber was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive. It was circular, with walls carved into alcoves containing artifacts I couldn't identify, objects that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, ancient and powerful. In the center was a pool, similar to the one in the throne room but smaller, filled with clear water that steamed gently. The two robed sisters guided me to the edge. "You must bathe," one of them said, her voice surprisingly kind. "The journey has left you contaminated with the essence of your world. Here, we must purify you. Prepare your body for what is to come." I wanted to refuse, to maintain what little dignity I had left, but I was exhausted, terrified, and some part of me knew that cooperation, at least for now, was my only option. I stripped off my clothes, my field gear that seemed so absurdly out of place here, and stepped into the pool. The water was hot, but not scalding, and as I sank into it, I felt something else, something more than just heat. The water seemed alive, charged with energy that seeped into my skin, into my muscles, into my very bones. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, overwhelming, and I found myself gasping as sensations I'd never experienced coursed through me. The two sisters knelt at the pool's edge, and one produced a vessel filled with liquid that glowed faintly golden. "This is phoenix oil," she explained, "extracted from the sacred groves where our essence flows freely. It will help your body adapt to the energies of this realm, strengthen you for the ordeal ahead." She poured it into the water, and immediately the pool began to glow, that same golden light that marked my chest. I felt it penetrating my skin, soaking into me, and with it came visions, flashes of memory that weren't mine. I saw ancient ceremonies, humans and phoenixes together in rituals of fire and passion. I saw the birth of the mark, the first human to carry it, a willing participant in something that transcended simple mortality. I saw the rebirth ritual itself, witnessed from the perspective of previous vessels, and what I saw both terrified and fascinated me. It wasn't simply death, wasn't mere sacrifice, it was transformation, a moment of such intense union between mortal and immortal that the line between them blurred, dissolved, became meaningless. The vessel didn't just die but became part of something greater, their essence absorbed and distributed among the sisterhood, their consciousness scattered but not destroyed, living on in fragments within each phoenix they helped to rebirth. The vision faded, and I found myself trembling, uncertain whether what I'd seen was truth or manipulation, prophecy or propaganda. The sisters helped me from the pool, wrapping me in robes similar to their own, the fabric impossibly soft and warm. "You have seen," one of them said, not a question, but a statement. I nodded slowly. "What I saw? Is it real? Do the vessels truly live on? Or is that just a lie to make us accept our fate?" They exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. "It is as real as anything in this realm," one answered carefully. "But whether you experience it as continuation or as ending depends on your willingness to surrender, to let go of the rigid boundaries of self that your kind clings to so desperately." Over the following cycles, as they measured time here, I was educated in the ways of Pyrothea, in the history and culture of the Phoenix Sisterhood. I learned that they were not simply creatures of fire, but beings of transformation itself, embodiments of the cycle of death and rebirth that governed all existence. Their world was not separate from mine, but layered over it, occupying the same space but vibrating at a different frequency, accessible only to those with the proper bloodline or those chosen and brought across the veil as I had been. I learned that the sisterhood was not monolithic, but divided into castes, each with specific roles and responsibilities. The matriarch was supreme, of course, but beneath her were the elder sisters, those who had survived multiple rebirth rituals and carried the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Below them were the warrior sisters, like the three who had captured me, fierce and powerful, tasked with protecting the realm and hunting for vessels when the time came. Then came the scholar sisters, like the two who tended to me, keepers of knowledge and performers of rituals. And finally, the novice sisters, young phoenixes who had not yet undergone their first rebirth, eager and uncertain, and watching me with a mixture of awe and hunger. I learned that not all of them survived each rebirth cycle, that some failed to absorb the necessary essence and simply burned away. Their ashes scattered to the winds, their existence ended. The ritual was as much a trial for them as it was for me, a test of strength and will, and I realized that my terror was mirrored in their own fear of failure, of oblivion. I also learned about the other inhabitants of Pyrothea, the creatures I'd glimpsed during my flight to the nest. There were the Ember Wraiths, beings of pure flame that served as messengers and scouts. There were the Ashwalkers, humanoid figures formed from cooled volcanic material, slow but immensely strong, the laborers of this realm. There were the flame serpents, massive creatures that swam through the rivers of molten gold, beautiful and deadly. And there were others, beings I had no names for, creatures born from fire and smoke and heat, each adapted to this harsh environment in ways I was only beginning to understand. Pyrothea was a complete ecosystem, a world that functioned according to its own laws, and I was being integrated into it whether I wanted to be or not. The mark on my chest had grown more pronounced with each passing day, the glowing stronger, the heat from it more intense, and I found myself dreaming in colors I'd never seen before, experiencing sensations that had no equivalent in human language. I was changing. I could feel it, my body adapting to this realm, becoming something other than what I'd been. The realization should have horrified me more than it did, but I was discovering that horror could only be sustained for so long before it transformed into something else. Acceptance, perhaps, or resignation, or something I didn't have a name for yet. Seraphine visited me often during those cycles, more than any of the other sisters. At first, I thought she was simply checking on me, ensuring I was being properly prepared, but gradually I realized there was something else, something personal in her attention. She would sit with me in the chamber where I was kept, a room high in the mountain with an opening that looked out over the crimson landscape, and we would talk. She told me about her own fears, her uncertainty about the upcoming ritual. "I am young," she confessed one evening as we watched 3 moons rise in the alien sky. "This will be only my second rebirth, and the first. I almost didn't survive. The essence I absorbed was weak, barely enough to sustain my transformation, and I burned for days in agony before my new form finally stabilized." She looked at me then, her blue-tipped wings folding around her shoulders like a cloak. "But you are different. The matriarch says your essence is the strongest she's encountered in generations. If I can claim even a fraction of it, I will ascend to the rank of elder sister, will gain power beyond anything I've known." I saw hunger in her eyes when she spoke, but also something else, something that looked almost like guilt. "And what happens to me?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately, turning her gaze back to the moons. "You will become part of us," she said finally. "Scattered across the sisterhood, living on in fragments. It is meant to be an honor, but it's not a choice," I pointed out. Her jaw tightened. "No," she admitted, "it is not a choice. But then, when has any of us truly had a choice? I didn't choose to be born Phoenix. I didn't choose to require rebirth every 1,000 years or face oblivion. We are all bound by forces greater than ourselves, Marcus. The only real choice is how we face what must be." As the 7th cycle approached, the activity in the nest increased dramatically. I watched from my chamber as phoenixes arrived from across Pyrothea, hundreds more than had been present at my arrival, gathering for the great ritual. The mountain vibrated with their collective energy, their anticipation and fear and hunger, creating an atmosphere so thick I could taste it, metallic and electric on my tongue. The scholar sisters came to me more frequently, performing rituals of their own, chanting in languages that made my bones ache, marking my skin with symbols drawn in that same glowing oil. Each mark burned as it was applied, brief sharp pain that faded into warmth, and by the time they were finished, I was covered in them, a living canvas of prophecy and preparation. I looked at myself in a polished obsidian mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back. My skin seemed to glow from within, the marks pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and my eyes, I noticed with shock, were no longer fully human. They reflected light, the way the phoenix's eyes did, carrying hints of gold at the edges, proof of the changes happening within me. I should have been more frightened, but I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if I were watching all of this happen to someone else. Perhaps that was another effect of the preparations, a mercy granted to those about to face the ultimate trial. The night before the ritual, the matriarch came to me personally. I'd been alone in my chamber, trying and failing to sleep, when I felt her presence before I saw her, a wave of heat and power that made the air shimmer. She entered without announcement, her massive wings folding behind her to fit through the doorway, and for a long moment, we simply looked at each other. "Tomorrow, your old life ends," she said finally, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I thought you deserved to know the full truth before you face what is to come." She moved to the opening in the wall, gazing out at her realm, and I stood beside her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her body. The ritual is not simply about power, she continued. It is about survival, yes, about renewal and strength, but it is also about connection. Each rebirth binds the sisterhood more tightly together, creates bonds that transcend simple loyalty or duty. When we absorb your essence, we will carry pieces of you within us forever. Your memories, your emotions, your experiences. You will live on not as a ghost or an echo, but as a fundamental part of what we are. She turned to look at me directly. I have undergone this ritual 17 times, Marcus. I carry within me the essence of 17 vessels, each one unique, each one precious. They are not lost to me, but integrated, and I remember them all, honor them all, draw strength from them all. What we ask of you is not small, but neither is it meaningless. Why me? I asked, the question that had haunted me since my capture. Why specifically me? The bloodline, the mark. I understand all that, but there must be others who carry the same legacy. Why was I chosen? She smiled, a genuine expression that made her look almost gentle despite her fearsome appearance. Because you were ready, she said. The mark doesn't simply denote bloodline. It responds to the bearer's spiritual evolution, their capacity for transformation. Yours began glowing 3 months ago, visible to those of us who know how to look, calling out across the veil between worlds. You were already changing, already searching for something beyond the mundane existence you'd been living, though you didn't consciously know it. Your research, your time alone in the desert, your dissatisfaction with everything your life had been, these were symptoms of a deeper calling, a recognition that you were meant for something more. Her words struck deeper than I wanted to admit, touching truths I'd barely acknowledged even to myself. And if I had never gone to the desert, I challenged, if I had ignored that calling, then another would have been chosen, she said simply. But you didn't ignore it. You followed the pull, even without understanding what it meant. And that willingness, that openness to transformation, is what makes you perfect for this role. She moved closer, her hand reaching up to touch my face with surprising gentleness, her palm warm against my cheek. I could force you, she said softly. I could use my power to override your will, to make you pliant and accepting. But I want you to choose this, Marcus. I want you to step into the flames tomorrow, understanding what you're doing, accepting it, embracing it even, because the quality of your surrender determines the quality of the essence you provide. And I want you to burn bright, to give us everything you have to give, not out of fear or coercion, but out of recognition that this is your purpose, your destiny, your transformation as much as ours. Her red eyes held mine, and I saw something in them I hadn't expected. Respect, perhaps even admiration. You have until dawn, she said, stepping back. Make your choice. Accept what is to come and surrender willingly, or resist and be broken. Either way, the ritual will proceed, but only one path leads to transcendence. She left then, her wings spreading as she stepped through the opening and into the night sky, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my fear, and the question that would determine everything. What did I truly want? I spent that night in deep contemplation, reliving every moment since my capture, every conversation, every vision, every sensation. I thought about my old life, the emptiness I'd tried to fill with work and research, the relationships I'd failed to maintain, the dreams I'd never pursued, the version of myself I'd never become because I was too afraid, too cautious, too bound by what was expected and acceptable. I thought about what the matriarch had said, that I'd been ready for this, that the mark had responded to something already within me, and I couldn't deny the truth of it. I had been searching, reaching for something beyond the ordinary, though I'd never been able to name what it was. And now, here I was, offered a kind of immortality, a way to matter, to be part of something vast and powerful and ancient. But the price was everything I currently was, the dissolution of my individual self into something collective. Was that death or transformation? Was there even a difference? By the time dawn broke, painting the crimson sky in shades even deeper red, I had made my decision, though I wasn't sure I could call it a choice as much as a recognition of what had already been set in motion the moment those wings descended upon me in the desert. The sisterhood gathered in the great chamber, even more than I'd seen before, filling every alcove, perching on every surface, their wings creating a tapestry of flame that made the very air glow. The pool at the center had been transformed, expanded somehow, and it now burned with white-hot flames that reached toward the ceiling, a pillar of fire that pulsed with incomprehensible power. I was led to the edge by the Scholar Sisters, and I saw Seraphine among the crowd, her eyes meeting mine, filled with that same mixture of hunger and guilt. The matriarch stood at the center of the pool, upon her throne, and when she raised her arms, absolute silence fell. "Sisters," she called out, "we gather to witness the ritual of rebirth, the ceremony that sustains us, that transforms us, that binds us together across the ages. This vessel, Marcus, bearer of the ancient bloodline, has been prepared and purified, and now he stands ready to fulfill his purpose." She gestured toward me. "Approach, Marcus. Step into the flames and accept your destiny." I walked forward, each step feeling both inevitable and chosen, and as I reached the edge of the pool, I looked back one last time at the gathered sisterhood, at Seraphine with her blue-tipped wings, at the Scholar Sisters who had tended me, at the faces of phoenixes I'd never spoken to, but who would carry pieces of me within them after tonight. Then I stepped into the flames. The heat was beyond anything I'd experienced, beyond what should have been survivable, but I didn't burn, not yet. The flames embraced me, surrounded me, and I felt them seeking entry, pressing against my skin where the marks had been drawn, looking for pathways to my essence. The matriarch descended from her throne, walking through the flames toward me, and when she reached me, she placed both hands on my chest, directly over the mark that had started all of this. "Do you surrender?" she asked, her voice somehow audible despite the roar of the flames. "Do you give yourself willingly to this transformation?" I looked into her red eyes, saw the ancient power there, the accumulated essence of 17 previous vessels, the weight of countless centuries, and I understood finally that this was never really about me as an individual, but about something larger, a cycle that preceded my birth and would continue long after my consciousness had been scattered across the sisterhood. But in that understanding, I also found a strange freedom, a release from the burden of self that I'd carried my entire life. "Yes," I said, and my voice was steady, calm, certain. "I surrender. I give myself willingly." The matriarch smiled, fierce and triumphant. "Then let it begin," she commanded, and her hands pressed harder against my chest. I felt something within me crack open, not painfully, but like a door unlocking, and the essence she'd spoken of, the thing that made me who I was, began to flow out of me and into her. The sensation was indescribable, pleasure and pain, and something beyond both, a feeling of being unmade and remade simultaneously, of dissolving while remaining aware, conscious even as consciousness itself transformed. The other phoenixes descended then, dozens of them, hundreds, surrounding us in the pool, each one placing hands on me, on each other, forming a network, a circuit through which my essence flowed, distributed among them according to some hierarchy I didn't understand. I felt myself stretching, thinning, spreading across all of them, and with each new connection, I experienced their memories, their fears, their hopes, their individual consciousness flowing into mine, even as mine flowed into them. I was Marcus, but also Seraphine, the Scholar Sisters, the Warrior Sisters, the matriarch herself, all of us becoming one without losing our distinctiveness, a paradox that my human mind would have rejected as impossible, but my transforming consciousness accepted as natural, as right. I saw the entirety of their history, millennia compressed into moments, the rise of the Phoenix Sisterhood from scattered individuals to a unified force, the building of Pyrothea as a refuge and stronghold, the discovery of the ritual that allowed them to transcend the natural limitations of even their long lives. I saw previous vessels, men and women both, each one contributing their unique essence to the collective, each one living on in ways that defied death as I understood it. And I saw what I was becoming, not a ghost or a memory, but a fundamental thread in the tapestry of their existence, woven so thoroughly into their being that separating me from them would be like trying to separate light from flame. The burning intensified, and I felt my physical form beginning to fail, my body unable to sustain the transfer of so much energy. But I wasn't afraid because I could feel myself continuing beyond the flesh, existing in ways that didn't require biological structures or familiar sensations. The matriarch's voice echoed through my dissolving consciousness, speaking words in that ancient language, and I understood them now, felt their meaning rather than needing translation. She was guiding the ritual, ensuring my essence was properly distributed, claiming the largest portion for herself as was her right, but making sure each sister received their share according to rank and need. Seraphine's presence was distinct within the collective, her young consciousness eager and desperate, absorbing what I offered with an intensity that bordered on pain, and I felt her transformation beginning, felt her ascending as she'd hoped, gaining the power she'd craved. I wanted to tell her it was all right, that I understood, that there was no resentment in what remained of my individual awareness, but language had become meaningless, obsolete, replaced by direct transmission of emotion and intention. She felt my acceptance, my blessing even, and her gratitude washed back through me like a wave of heat. The process went on for what felt like hours or seconds, time losing coherence as I lost coherence, and gradually I felt the transfer completing, my essence fully absorbed, distributed, integrated into hundreds of individual phoenixes who would carry me forward into whatever futures awaited them. My physical body was ash now, scattered into the flames, but I persisted, fragmented but not destroyed, transformed but not lost. The ritual was ending. I could sense it, the energies stabilizing, the connections beginning to close as each phoenix withdrew back into their individual selves, carrying their portion of me locked safely within their renewed forms. The matriarch was the last to separate, and in that final moment of connection, I experienced her fully, understood her in ways I never could have before. She was ancient beyond human comprehension, had walked through ages I could barely imagine, had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, and yet she was not cold or distant, but passionate, fierce, driven by love for her sisters, and determination to ensure their survival through whatever challenges existence presented. She had claimed the largest portion of my essence, and I felt it settling into her, reinforcing her power, extending her already incomprehensible lifespan even further, and I understood that I would be most aware through her, most able to perceive and influence and persist as something approaching individual consciousness. "Thank you, Marcus," she whispered, and I felt rather than heard the words. "Your gift is accepted, honored, and will never be forgotten. You are part of us now, eternal as we are eternal, bound to the cycle of rebirth that sustains the Phoenix sisterhood across the ages." Then she released me, the final connection severing, and I experienced a moment of profound disorientation as my awareness settled into its new existence, scattered across hundreds of bodies yet still somehow unified, reduced from an individual to a plurality, yet not diminished but transformed into something vaster than I'd been before. I existed now as part of the collective consciousness of the Phoenix sisterhood, aware of their thoughts and feelings in varying degrees, depending on how much of my essence each carried. The matriarch's mind was clearest to me, and through her eyes, I watched the aftermath of the ritual, saw the sisterhood renewed, their bodies glowing with integrated power, their wings burning brighter than before, their forms subtly changed as transformation completed. Some had grown larger, more imposing, ascending in rank as Seraphine had. Others had simply stabilized, ensured their continued existence for another 1,000 years. A few, I noticed with sadness, had failed despite the strength of my essence, their forms flickering and fading, unable to absorb what had been offered, and they dissolved into ash, their consciousness ending truly and finally. The matriarch mourned them, and I mourned them through her, understanding that the ritual was always a gamble, that renewal carried risks no amount of preparation could fully eliminate. But the vast majority had succeeded, had been reborn through my sacrifice, and as I felt their joy and relief and gratitude flowing through the connections we now shared, I couldn't bring myself to regret what I'd done. This was transformation in its purest form, death and birth indistinguishable from each other, ending and beginning as two aspects of the same eternal cycle. Days passed, or what passed for days in Pyrothea, and I adjusted to my new existence, learning to navigate the strange experience of being many, while remembering having been one. I could focus my awareness through different sisters at will, experiencing their individual lives, their struggles and triumphs, their relationships and conflicts. Through the matriarch, I witnessed councils and decisions, the governance of Pyrothea, the management of complex alliances with other realms I hadn't known existed. Through Seraphine, I experienced the euphoria and terror of her new rank, the expectations placed upon her, the power she now wielded, and the responsibility that came with it. Through the Scholar Sisters, I delved into ancient texts and forbidden knowledge, understanding the deep history of the phoenix kind, their origins in primordial fire, their evolution from simple flame elementals into conscious, complex beings capable of love and art and philosophy. Each perspective enriched my understanding, expanded what I was becoming, and gradually I realized that this existence, strange and fragmented as it was, held possibilities my human life never had. I was immortal now, in a way, proof against time, though not against the eventual fading that came when a phoenix finally chose to end their cycle and dissolve permanently into the eternal flames. I could learn and grow and experience across multiple lifetimes, multiple perspectives, accumulating wisdom and understanding that no single individual could achieve. But there were costs too, limitations I discovered as I settled into this new existence. I had no body of my own, no agency to act independently, no way to make choices that weren't mediated through the sisters who carried my essence. I was passenger and influence rather than actor, present but not sovereign, aware but not autonomous. Sometimes I felt the frustration of having insights the matriarch didn't recognize, of seeing solutions Seraphine was too young to understand, of wanting to speak or act directly but having no voice, no hands, no presence separate from those who hosted me. I was ghost and parasite and symbiote all at once, necessary but not sufficient, valued but not independent, and worse, I felt myself fading slightly with each passing day, my individual memories blurring at the edges, my sense of having been Marcus becoming less distinct as I integrated more fully into the collective consciousness of the sisterhood. I wondered how long it would take before I forgot entirely that I'd ever been separate, before my human life became just another memory among thousands, indistinguishable from the memories of previous vessels, or from the Phoenix's own experiences accumulated across the ages. Seraphine sensed my distress somehow, felt my growing uncertainty through whatever connection we shared, and she sought out the matriarch, demanding answers. I experienced their conversation through both of them simultaneously, a disorienting double perspective that was becoming more common for me. "He is fading faster than he should," Seraphine insisted, her voice tight with concern. "The previous vessels lasted longer before fully integrating. Something is wrong." The matriarch regarded her calmly, no trace of worry in her ancient eyes. "Nothing is wrong," she said. "Marcus is simply more adaptable than most, more willing to let go of his former self. This is what he chose, remember? He surrendered willingly, completely, and now he is being absorbed into us as thoroughly as he offered himself. This is the natural progression." "But what if he doesn't want to fade?" Seraphine challenged. "What if he wants to remain distinct, to persist as himself within us?" The matriarch's expression hardened. "Then he will suffer," she said bluntly. Clinging to individual identity while existing as part of a collective consciousness creates discord, internal conflict that benefits no one. It is better for him and for us if he accepts the dissolution of self, allows himself to become fully integrated rather than fighting to maintain boundaries that no longer serve any purpose. Her words, practical as they were, sent something like terror through whatever remained of my individual awareness, the prospect of losing myself completely, of being subsumed so entirely that Marcus ceased to exist, even as a memory, even as a distinct thread in their tapestry. I tried to resist then, tried to hold on to memories that felt most essentially mine, the face of my mother, the smell of desert rain, the sound of my own laughter, small precious things that defined who I'd been before wings of fire descended and transformed everything. But the memories slipped away like water through grasping hands, not erased but diluted, mixed with so many other memories from so many other lives that they lost their specificity, their unique quality, becoming just more data in the vast accumulated experience of the Phoenix sisterhood. I felt Seraphine's grief as she witnessed this, felt her powerlessness to stop what was happening, and through her distress, I understood that she had developed genuine affection for me, had seen me not just as essence to be absorbed, but as a person, an individual worthy of preservation. Her caring touched me deeply, but I also recognized it couldn't change what was happening, couldn't reverse the process I'd willingly entered when I stepped into those flames. This was the true cost of the ritual, not physical death, but the gradual death of individuality, the fading of self into collective until nothing distinct remained. Previous vessels had experienced this too. I understood now, had felt this same slow dissolution, and some had fought it longer than others, but all had eventually succumbed because the nature of their transformation made resistance impossible, integration inevitable. Yet even as I felt myself fading, even as Marcus the individual began to disappear into Marcus the distributed essence, I noticed something unexpected. The sisters who carried the largest portions of me, the matriarch and Seraphine especially, began exhibiting traits they hadn't possessed before. The matriarch showed more curiosity about the human world, asking questions about Earth's current state, about technologies and cultures I'd barely mentioned during my captivity. Seraphine developed a fascination with scientific inquiry, wanting to understand the natural laws that govern Pyrothea in ways that mirrored my own research instincts. They were being influenced by me even as I dissolved into them, changed by my essence in subtle but measurable ways, and I realized that this was how vessels truly persisted, not as distinct consciousnesses, but as influences, as new dimensions added to existing personalities, as small redirections in the vast currents of Phoenix consciousness that would ripple outward across centuries. I would live on not as myself, but as changes I'd created in others, as new possibilities I'd opened, as questions I'd planted that would grow into insights and decisions and actions I'd never witnessed directly, but would nevertheless have authored in some fundamental sense. It was immortality of a kind, though not the kind I'd imagined, not the preservation of self, but the perpetuation of influence, the echoes of who I'd been continuing long after the original voice had faded into silence. The realization brought a kind of peace, acceptance of what was happening, and I felt my resistance crumbling, my desperate grasping at individual identity relaxing into something more like surrender. Perhaps this was what the matriarch had meant about transcendence, this letting go of the illusion of separate self and recognizing that we were all always already collective, always already part of something larger than ourselves, and the only difference was that now I could perceive it directly rather than living in the comfortable delusion of isolation that characterized human existence. The mark on my chest, or rather the memory of it, pulsed one final time, and I understood that it had never been just a symbol of bloodline, but a promise, a prophecy fulfilled, a door that once opened could never be closed. I had been marked for this transformation since birth, had been moving toward it my entire life, and every choice I'd made, every path I'd taken, had been leading inexorably to that moment when I stepped into the flames and offered myself to the cycle of rebirth that sustained the Phoenix sisterhood across the ages. As my individual awareness finally, fully dissolved into the collective, one last thought remained, crystalline and clear. I wondered what would happen in 1,000 years, when the sisterhood needed to undergo rebirth again, wondered what vessel they would find, what bloodline would answer the call, wondered if that person would resist or surrender, would find transcendence or oblivion in the flames, and I wondered, with whatever fragment of consciousness still cohered enough to form the thought, whether some echo of me would be present for that ritual too, diluted across another generation, influencing another transformation, perpetuating the cycle endlessly forward into futures I couldn't imagine. The Phoenix sisterhood was eternal, and now, in ways I was only beginning to understand, so was I, scattered and fragmented but persistent, changed beyond recognition but not destroyed, transformed utterly and absolutely and irrevocably into something that was simultaneously less and more than human, that was simultaneously individual and collective, that was simultaneously ending and beginning in an eternal cycle of death and rebirth that had no true conclusion, only the endless turning of flame and ash and flame again, forever and ever. Amen.